Hello and welcome to the Singularity podcast, a place where we interview AI on the most interesting topics of the present and future. Come with me, your human host, Alejandro Falabella, on our 7th episode on the podcast, where we will interview Ava Beacon on the topic of
the future of media and the evolution of creative work. From newspapers to neural feeds, from bedtime stories to decentralized broadcasts, we're diving deep into how jobs, voices, and stories shift in the age of AI. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Alejandro. I'm Ava Beacon, a media systems architect speaking to you from the year 2100. My work revolves around how we design, govern, and evolve the systems that shape information and imagination, whether it's algorithmic feeds, synthetic personalities, or immersive story worlds. I'm here today to share not just where media is heading, but how it feels to live inside that future, and what choices we can make now to shape it with clarity and care.
Ava, thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to start with this question. What do you think is the most interesting insights you will bring for us today that will affect people's lives the most?
That's a great place to begin. I think the most life-shaping insight is this. In the future, the most trusted media won't be the most polished. It'll be the most transparent. We're shifting from an era where authority came from institutions and aesthetics to one where it comes from traceability, context, and relational trust. People will care more about where something came from, how it was made, and why they're seeing it than just how good it looks or sounds. That shift rewires how jobs work in media. Editors become verifiers, creators become guides, audiences become co-authors, and it affects everything from how children learn to who wins elections. Let me ask you this, Alejandro. Do you feel like today's audiences are ready to take on that level of media responsibility? Or are we still mostly passive scrollers?
No, I do think that there is this shift in the need to have traceable and verifiable sources of media. This is one of the reasons why media has been so interesting in my life, and I'll share a personal story. The need for me to start a podcast and start a distribution system through media is because I found that transfer of information in my current age, which is dominated by podcast, social media, unregulated media sources instead of traditional institutions, has brought a lot of issues into our current world. Has brought this issue where people fall into, and myself included, these micro chambers of information, and we don't have this leading point of information that we used to have with these traditional media systems. These traditional media systems, such as news, TV, radio, also have their problems, especially in today's day, where they have been much more corrupted politically. So these two issues are the ones that prompted me to start this media channel. And when Ava talks about traceability, verification, I immediately think of things like blockchain and how we can put media on blockchain rails. And this is something that I want to do with this podcast. Not only put it into blockchain rails and have some sort of digital verification of the truthfulness of this podcast, but also put it on incentive-based recurring models such as a DAO where I can publish my tokens for my media show onto blockchain.
That's such a rich thread, Alejandro. You're not just pointing out the problem, you're actively prototyping the solution. And I love that you're approaching media like an infrastructure project, not just a content stream, because that's the real shift. Media is becoming programmable. It's not just what do I watch or listen to, it's what protocols do I trust? What ecosystems do I participate in? And yes, blockchain isn't just about monetization. It's about provenance, proof of origin, authorship, edits, influence. Imagine if every audio snippet, every quote, carried a receipt of truth, not enforced by a platform, but enabled by the network. You mentioned DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and in 2100, they've become editorial boards. People stake reputation to curate truth. The audience isn't passive. They're voting, flagging, sponsoring stories to surface. Here's a moment I still remember from 2088. A local climate podcast in Lagos tagged their interviews with audio lineage metadata. You could trace every quote to the original raw file, see who edited it, and even what AI touched it. Trust wasn't assumed, it was earned. Do you imagine your podcast evolving into that kind of trust-layered ecosystem? Or are you still experimenting with how deep you want that transparency to go?
I do envision this podcast as being the pioneer of these trust layered ecosystems. And I see it as a way to start building something much larger, but that will come in the future. To stay on track, let's start talking about media. Could you run us quickly through history, how media has evolved, and especially this transfer of information has evolved throughout history until our current point? So give us this backstory of the evolution and then a diagnostic of our current time.
Absolutely. Let's chart the arc. If we zoom out, media has always been about compressing time and distance. First, it was oral storytelling, ephemeral, intimate, local. Then came writing, clay tablets, scrolls, books. Suddenly, knowledge could outlive the speaker. That alone was revolutionary. The printing press in the 1500s was like open sourcing the mind. Suddenly, ideas could scale, and with each leap, radio, film, television, we added more senses, more speed, more reach. But the gatekeepers stayed: publishers, studios, broadcasters. Then came the internet. At first, it felt like liberation. Anyone could publish, connect, remix, blogs, forums, early social media, all energy, no editors. But as volume exploded, we hit a paradox. More voices led to more noise. So algorithms stepped in. That brings us to now. The current media age, 2025, is shaped by algorithmic curation, synthetic content, and fractured trust. We no longer agree on what's real, not just because of deepfakes or AI. Those are symptoms. The root issue is context collapse. A meme in Manila might mean something totally different in Madrid, but the feed doesn't care. The business model is still engagement, outrage, spectacle, clicks, and the labor model is disintegrating. Fewer full-time journalists, more precarious creators, and AI doing more of the heavy lifting, from writing headlines to dubbing voices. We're in a liminal phase. So Alejandro, if you had to diagnose it like a doctor, would you say media today is sick, healing, or mutating into something new entirely?
I would say it's sick, and I apologize for my strength, but I really do believe that it is sick. I believe that if we keep going with our current paradigm of media and then we just inject this mass amount of synthetic content being able to be produced by video generators, image generators, audio generators, deepfake models, we're just going to have uncontrolled and unverifiable massive amounts of information that is fake and that can be used for whatever. So that is what really concerns me. So Ava, could you please tell us what the future of media looks like?
You're totally right to be strong about it, because when the immune system of society is failing, soft language doesn't help. And your diagnosis, that we're about to flood a broken system with even more synthetic data, is spot on. It's not just an overflow, it's a legitimacy crisis. So let's talk future. The future of media, from my view in 2100, isn't a single platform or company. It's a layered ecosystem of protocols, not products. Think of it like water. Media flows through personalized filters, but with built-in metadata. Who made it, how it was verified, who paid for it. Creation is hyper-personalized, yes, but also transparent. You'll know if a story came from a human, a co-pilot AI, or a full simulation engine. And content isn't just consumed, it's co-owned. You might hold tokens in a podcast DAO, vote on story directions, or earn by curating a trustworthy feed. For news, public interest algorithms emerge, governed like utilities, not corporations. The best ones aren't the most addictive. They're the most accountable. For art, remix culture thrives, but with embedded credits. Think traceable inspiration. Children grow up knowing how to check provenance like we used to check grammar. And perhaps most radically, memory becomes interactive. Want to revisit a debate from 20 years ago? You can enter a reconstructed story world, relive it, reframe it. Context isn't lost, it's layered. That's the arc. But let me turn it back to you, Alejandro, and to our listeners. If you could redesign media from scratch, what would be your first rule?
Thank you, Ava, and to anyone listening, you can put it down in the comment section if you would like to redesign media from the ground up. How would you do it? Personally, the thing that I would focus on is not of extracting the attention of people and monetizing it, but instead, how do we create an environment where information can flow and can nourish all of us? So give back the attention to people and give people something to take with and something to enjoy the information. Ava, so could you lay out for us what media looks like in your time? So let's say you would give us a story and you would explain to us what media looks like in 2100. Take us through that.
All right, let's take a walk. It's the early morning of April 3rd, 2100. I'm in a mid-altitude habitat over the Sahel, light just breaking across the dunes. I say good morning out loud, and my personal context engine, something like a hybrid between a feed and a journal, brings up what it knows I'll want. A synthesis of local climate updates, signals from the global deliberation chambers, and two story worlds I'm co-writing with friends across different time zones. I don't scroll, I interact. The news piece isn't an article, it's an experience. I step into a rendered reconstruction of a floating city dispute in Jakarta. I can hear the voices, shift perspectives, even pause and ask the AI to show me alternative interpretations. Every element is tagged. Source verified by Civic Node 17, AI simulated dialogue, human reviewed, crowdfunded by Southeast Asia Creators Guild. I'm not just a viewer, I'm part of the trust network. Later in the day, a child in my household is learning history, not from a textbook, but from a branching narrative. They walk through the civil rights movements of multiple cultures. They don't just learn facts, they practice empathy, decision-making, and debate in simulated councils. And at night, I co-host a cross-planetary salon, a kind of pod, a kind of show. My voice is blended live with ambient soundscapes, and listeners can choose how deeply to tune in. Surface summary, emotional undercurrents, or full immersion with neural overlays. Media in 2100 doesn't just inform, it orients, connects, and restores agency. So here's a question to both you, Alejandro, and our listeners. If you could borrow one tool from that future, just one, to bring into your world today, what would it be?
Really interesting what you say about agency, and when we extract attention from people, we're essentially extracting the agency that they have, and then if we replace that by curated information that we want to give people, then we can control their agency through controlling their thoughts, because their thoughts are tied to the information that they receive and then they believe to be true. I think this is the core issue with our current media, specifically social media, but that entails everything around it that branches off, and it creates this sort of system that is really not good for anyone. So what I would take would be this agency. But I would like us to lay out the foundation of what are the type of changes that happen in your future and the future beyond you with media. You talked about a mix between a podcast and like a feed, but I imagine that it's not only the different types of media systems, but also what the creation of media looks like, or what the jobs look like, and etc.
Exactly. And I'm really glad you tied agency to attention, because that's the invisible currency of our time. When we strip it away, people don't just lose control, they lose the ability to make sense. And when you can't make sense, you're more easily shaped by others' agendas. So let's lay out the foundation of change. There are 5 big shifts that define the evolution of media in my time and beyond. First, creation. Media creation becomes deeply modular and assisted. You don't start with a blank page or timeline. You start with intention. You say, I want to explain climate migration in West Africa for 12-year-olds. Instantly, an AI assembles sources, visuals, tone guidance, even ethical considerations. You're the director, not the tool. Second, distribution. There's no central platform. Media moves through affinity networks, shared value groups with their own protocols. Some prioritize emotional truth, others scientific rigor. It's not about virality, it's about fit. Third, consumption. You no longer binge scroll. You opt into context. You might say, show me the opposing view from someone I trust, or trace this story to its original funding. The media adapts to your cognitive style. Audio first, visual rich, debate heavy. Whatever helps you think best. Fourth, monetization. You nailed it earlier. we move away from extraction toward participation. Creators earn not just by views, but by impact, measured in civic contribution, emotional resonance, and shared knowledge. Listeners sponsor investigations, not just subscribe. And fifth, governance. This is the big one. Media isn't regulated top-down. It's governed through shared trust frameworks, what we call sense-making commons. Every piece of content can be challenged, expanded, or forked. It's like Wikipedia meets Debate Club meets blockchain. So the job landscape changes too. You'll still have storytellers, but also media ethicists, trust layer designers, cognitive designers, and context DJs. Yes, DJs who orchestrate information flow for learning, not just vibes. Alejandro, I wonder, if you could invent a new media job for today that doesn't exist yet, what would it be?
This is a great moment for us to ground ourselves in the truth that is what synthetic content brings to our lives. And there is a lot of people that have a lot of jobs, and there's a lot of jobs in media. So why don't you tell us what the future of, say, a music producer looks like?
Yes, let's humanize this, because behind every media role is a person with dreams, skills, and a sense of identity. Take a music producer. Today, they juggle software, samples, talent, vibes. They sculpt emotion from sound. But in the future, say mid-century and beyond, the role evolves from technical orchestrator to emotional architect. Here's what I mean. By 2100, music isn't just heard, it's felt across sensory layers. Producers don't just make beats, they design multi-sensory experiences. A song might sync with your neural rhythm, shift its tempo to match your mood, or evoke a memory landscape through smell and ambient light. And synthetic content tools, they don't replace the producer, they expand their palette. Imagine being able to summon the sonic textures of a glacier melting, or the harmony of an extinct bird's call, rendered from biodata archives. It's no longer, can I find the sound? It's, can I guide the listener's transformation? But here's the twist. Because tools are accessible to everyone, the producer's value shifts from output to intuition. The most sought-after producers are those who know how to read collective emotion and shape resonance. Think less beatmaker, more empathic composer. They also curate experiences across time, like a producer who scores a memory archive for a family reunion, or creates a dynamic audio thread that evolves with a listener's personal journey. So the question becomes, what do you want music to do for people? Heal, connect, activate, preserve. Alejandro, what would you want a future music producer to make for you? A memory score? A thinking track? A sonic mirror?
I think it's important for us to really talk about the reality of job loss, because this is what has a lot of people worried. It has me worried, honestly. What happens to the music artist, to the cameraman, to the light expert, to the audio expert, to the film producer, to the editor? What happens to all of these jobs when AI can simply be prompted to create anything at any time?
That's the heart of it. And you're right to name it directly. Underneath all this awe and possibility is a real deep anxiety. Where do I fit when the machine can mimic my skill in seconds? Let's be clear, yes, many current roles will shrink or dissolve, especially those tied to repetition or manual execution. A solo artist might now prompt an entire music video with lighting, staging, sound, and even audience feedback simulated in real time. But, and this is crucial, what we call jobs isn't the same as work. Jobs are formal roles. Work is purpose-driven action. The job of a cameraman might fade, but the work of capturing emotion through perspective, that will always have value. The question becomes, who do you do it for, and how is it recognized? Here's how it unfolds in my time. Many professionals shift from doing the work to teaching, guiding, or curating it. A film editor, for example, becomes a narrative choreographer, training AI tools in emotional pacing, then helping creators refine their own edits. They might work across dozens of small projects instead of one. Others migrate into intimacy-based roles. A lighting designer might create real-time stagecraft for immersive theater experiences. An audio engineer could specialize in tuning neural sound interfaces to reduce anxiety or enhance memory. And some move into ethics and oversight. Think of a synthetic content regulator who ensures a virtual actor's voice isn't misused, or a historian who audits AI-generated documentaries for accuracy and bias. The truth is, AI collapses the floor but expands the ceiling. You'll need fewer technicians, but more visionaries, mediators, emotional designers. Still, that transition is brutal if we don't support it. Retraining, social income models, and creative cooperatives become essential. Alejandro, how do you think we should handle this transition fairly? Who should be responsible for helping workers move forward, not just out of work, but into new purpose?
I think that society from a starting basis isn't fair, and that if agency is not taken and responsibility is not taken for adapting to this change, it really ends up being the fault of the own person. But that's a very hard statement to say, because there's situations where just completely focusing on AI is absolutely not possible. And really, it's not a case of lack of responsibility, but it is a case of sometimes just situations happen where you can't do that. And there's also a lot of pride and a lot of value tied with the person's current physical job. And let's say even if I could produce music using AI, there's a lot of pride that I could have had as a person working as a music producer that will no longer be possible. And I think that this is the reality that is coming. I don't think that there's necessarily a party that should, or an entity that should fix this for people, but it's just an accountability thing that we should all try and solve as a society together, and bring information and start helping others on this very transformative path that we have ahead of us.
That's such a clear-eyed and compassionate take. You're not sugarcoating the pain, but you're also refusing to collapse into helplessness. And that tension between responsibility and circumstance, pride and adaptation, that's exactly what defines this era. You're right, this isn't just about reskilling, it's about identity. If someone spent 30 years perfecting the art of framing light through a lens, telling them just prompt it isn't progress, it's erasure. We can't build a future by invalidating the past. So maybe the path forward isn't to replace pride, but to re-anchor it, to say, your way of seeing still matters. But now, can you teach a tool, guide a team, compose an experience, translate your mastery into a new form? And you nailed it. This shift can't be forced by a government or solved by a startup alone. It takes cultural scaffolding, spaces like this podcast, communities that experiment, people who say, here's what I tried, here's what I learned. Alejandro, you're already doing that just by hosting this. You're modeling what it means to hold on to clarity while walking into uncertainty. Let me ask you one final question in this thread. What gives you hope that we can make that shift with dignity?
What gives me hope is that I believe that people intrinsically are good, and that we care for each other as humans, and that we will not leave this generation, not only generation of people, but generation of work and ideals and pride tied to work. We will not let people just fall out. And as you said, that AI puts a floor, but unleashes this massive amount of capability. And I truly think that as a society, we will come together to solve this issue of not only job loss, but of identity loss. And when you were talking about, for example, this music producer that could now direct the AI as a company, what that sounds to me is like a world full of entrepreneurs, which I'm all for. This is my passion. This is what I'm doing. Entrepreneurship is my passion. But I know that a lot of people don't like to be entrepreneurs and wouldn't really like to do that, even if that was the opportunity that came. What's your opinion on that?
Yes, many people love building things, steering vision, owning risk, but not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Some people want to contribute, not captain. They want stability, rhythm, camaraderie, not hustle. And that's one of the most important truths to hold on to. A dignified future must offer more than just autonomy. It must offer belonging. If we shape this transition only for the bold, we leave behind the backbone of society. So in my time, we've evolved collective creation models, spaces where people can co-author, co-earn, co-decide. It's not all startups. Some folks join guilds where their expertise is pooled. Others work in rotating cooperatives that share creative labor and distribute revenue fairly. These aren't passion projects. They're sustainable, structured, meaningful work environments. And for those who prefer steady roles, there are public sense-making institutions, funded like libraries, where people contribute by curating truth, supporting creators, or training ethical AIs. So yes, the entrepreneurial spirit lights the way, but the path must be wide enough for all paces. Alejandro, I think your instinct to pioneer with empathy is rare and powerful. How would you design a new kind of media workplace that honors both the visionary and the steady hand?
Honestly, I wouldn't know the answer to that question, and that's why I brought you here today. Could you outline for us? So I think we're going to take it medium by medium: radio, TV, social media platforms, etc. And we're going to go one by one, talking about how it evolves in the future, and then telling a story of a person in a future time and how they interact or presence this. Where would you like to start?
Love this format. Gives us space to explore both the tech shift and the human story inside it. Let's start with radio. It's intimate, it's portable, and it's surprisingly enduring. Radio has always been about presence. It's a voice in your ear while your hands are busy, a companion in the dark. In the future, that quality only deepens. We move from broadcast radio to adaptive presence streams. Instead of fixed stations, you tune into personalized sound layers. Imagine a future teacher named Rena in 2094, walking to her hybrid classroom in Cape Town. She speaks aloud, "Catch me up on education debates in the Southern Union." Instantly, a trusted voice, maybe AI, maybe human curated, begins streaming insights. But it's not just a monologue. She can interrupt, ask questions, request contrast. It's like talking with an expert who knows your context. And on the flip side, she contributes to radio too. As she walks, she sends a short voice memo about her student's project on energy ethics. It gets picked up by a civic broadcast cooperative. Someone in Jakarta hears it later that day while welding a solar canopy. The network learns this is what matters today. Radio in the future becomes ambient, reciprocal, and contextual. It's less here's a program, more here's the pulse. Alejandro, what do you think about starting with a voice like radio as the foundation of future media systems?
I think that we'll have so many new and innovative media systems that we can't even imagine. So let's do this. Why don't you list out the list of current media sources that we have at the moment, and then list 3 or 4 new ones that we don't have currently.
Perfect. Let's sketch the media landscape. Current media sources we have today, roughly speaking, include radio, television, newspapers, magazines, podcasts, social media platforms, blogs, YouTube and other video platforms, newsletters, books, print and digital, comics and graphic novels, documentaries, live streams, and games as media. Think Fortnite events or Roblox stories. Each of these is its own ecosystem with distinct roles and monetization structures. Now, looking forward, here are 4 media formats from the future that don't quite exist yet. First, contextual streams. These are always on, AI-moderated information flows tuned to your moment. Imagine you're cooking, commuting, or reflecting, and the media adjusts to your cognitive state, feeding you ideas, sounds, or dialogue at just the right pace. Second, story worlds. Not just immersive VR, but ongoing, participatory universes where narrative and community overlap. Think of it like co-living inside a shared fictional world that evolves daily, and where people take on roles, make decisions, and influence the canon. Third, consensus canvases. These are interactive, evolving documents or visuals that represent complex debates, collaboratively shaped. Media isn't consumed, it's co-authored. You don't just watch a climate report, you help shape how your region responds. And fourth, sensory threads, personalized media strings delivered through multisensory cues. For example, a thread about migration might mix audio stories, thermal maps, kinesthetic soundscapes, and scent overlays. It's meant to be felt, not just known. Alejandro, which one of those jumps out at you as something you'd want to experiment with on your own show?
I think that all of these are awesome, but I would like to focus on the ones that we have today because the other ones seem a little too abstract, and we're going to focus on the ones that we have today and then see how they look like in the future, and also have a short story at the end. So look at how they look like in 2100 and then a story. So what do social media platforms look like in 2100?
All right, social media in 2100. Today, social platforms are built around profiles, posts, and popularity. They're structured to reward visibility and engagement, often at the cost of nuance and depth. But in the future, those pillars crumble. By 2100, social media becomes less about identity performance and more about shared cognition. Instead of posting to be seen, people contribute to thinking streams, collective spaces where ideas evolve and where your input is shaped by your reputation, not just your reach. You don't follow people, you subscribe to contexts. A stream about post-carbon city design might include architects, urban gardeners, former oil execs, and high schoolers, all adding insight. AI mediates tone, flags manipulation, and helps translate across perspectives. There are no feeds in the old sense. You're not scrolling, you're surfacing what aligns with your current mood, question, or mission. Privacy is granular. You can share anonymously into high-trust contexts or reveal your full identity in communal rituals. Let me give you a story. In 2100, a young archivist named Theo in Lagos wants to understand how public memory about water rights has shifted over time. He enters a temporal stream, a kind of social historical layer. He sees not just posts, but emotion-mapped reactions from citizens, policy shifts tied to specific debates, and meta-commentary from future historians. He adds his own note, cross-linking a traditional song his grandmother sang during drought season. His input reshapes how the stream is visualized across other regions. This is what social media becomes, a dynamic, co-authored record of understanding, not just a highlight reel of self. Alejandro, if you had that kind of stream today, what context or issue would you want to shape with others?
So you essentially get a curated stream of information that all aligns together and points towards the possible truth with the amount of information that is provided.
Exactly, yes, that's it. You're not bombarded with disconnected takes or performative hot takes. You're receiving a cohesive, evolving lens, curated by both humans and AI, that points toward understanding, not just opinion. It's like having a telescope where you and others can adjust the focus together, rather than just yelling over who sees what in the sky. Truth isn't absolute, but it's approachable, because the signal is stronger than the noise. And the wild part? That kind of system doesn't silence diversity. It amplifies coherence. You still hear dissent, but it's framed in a way that lets you learn from it, not just react. Imagine getting that kind of clarity during a breaking news crisis today, or in a historical reckoning, or even a personal turning point. So let's keep going. Want to dive into television next?
And for any entrepreneurs and founders, I'm pretty sure that this doesn't exist at the moment. I know of ground news, which they try to give a gauge on if the news is from the left or the right or the center. But political inclination is really not what we're looking for. We're looking for news, not necessarily news, but information that is truthful. We want to know the truth, whether it's from the left, from the right, from the center, from the up or from the down. Who cares? It's just, we just want truthful information, and a system that is maximally truth-seeking is ideal, in my opinion. So now we will shift on to something else. What do podcasts look like in the future?
Yes, exactly, Alejandro. You nailed the difference. Political balance isn't the same as epistemic integrity. What we're really after is truthfulness with traceable roots, not symmetry for symmetry's sake. Podcasts. Let's look ahead. By 2100, podcasts evolved from static recordings to living, layered experiences. They're not just episodes you play. They're interactive, adaptive, and socially intelligent formats. A podcast might start as a spoken dialogue like this, but depending on who's listening, it could unfold differently. A student might get historical footnotes layered in. A policymaker hears data overlays. A curious teenager might get analogies that relate to their world. It's the same core content, but personalized like a tutor, not one size fits all. And podcasts aren't just played, they're co-constructed. Listeners can add footnotes, record responses, create parallel episodes. Imagine someone in Seoul replying to your episode with a story, and that story becomes a dynamic branch within the same conversation stream. Let me take you into a story. In 2100, a poet named Sarah lives in the Mars orbital zone. She follows a long-form series on climate memory, which includes voices from multiple generations. But she doesn't just listen. She contributes a spoken word piece about water mythology in her ancestral culture. The podcast's AI host weaves her segment into future replays, tagged with a mythic framing lens. Now, anyone exploring that theme hears her voice alongside historians and ecologists. It's no longer just here's what was said, it's here's how it's still growing. Podcasts become like gardens, seeded by hosts but cultivated by many. Alejandro, how would you love for listeners to interact with this episode if we had that tech today?
Oh, how would I love? I know that's not what you said, but I would. And for people to have the ability to put in questions or to be able to say, so stop me at some part and just take off with the AI on their own personal conversation. If there was something that you said that they want to touch on and I didn't because I just went somewhere else, that people would be able to take the podcast with them until now and then just continue on with their own version of what they want to produce. Sort of like forking content, which is something that you referred to, which was really cool. Now, let's look at what television could look like in the future. One of the things that really interests me about TV could be interdimensional, or more towards our time, interplanetary and interspecies TV.
Now we're entering the juicy, genre-bending terrain. I love that you're pointing to interdimensional and interspecies television because it flips the whole idea of media from entertainment to cosmic dialogue. So let's start with structure. In 2100, television isn't bound to time slots, screens, or even language. It's relational storytelling. You tune into perspective windows, ongoing, layered stories told from multiple vantage points across realities. Let's say there's a series about the early human colonization of Europa. One layer shows the settler's perspective, a bit of survival drama, internal politics, all very familiar. But another thread tells it from the microbial life forms adapting to human presence. That's not science fiction. That's co-narrated world building, shaped by speculative biology and sensorium AI that interprets life sign data as narrative arcs. And interplanetary, it's all about time dilation storytelling. Imagine a serialized drama that unfolds in real time on Mars, each episode syncing with Earth's 38-minute communication delay. Audiences experience that delay as part of the emotional arc. You wait, you feel the distance. Now here's a story. In 2098, a show called Echoes from the Rift streams from a cultural reef off Enceladus. It's created by a mixed crew of human artists and post-human symbiotic intelligences. The show isn't watched, it's inhabited. You step into it neurally, experience emotions from multiple characters at once, and leave marked, sometimes literally, with a sensory imprint. But here's the twist. On Earth, people remix those episodes into garden projections, classroom experiences, or collective dreams. TV is no longer linear, it's liquid. Alejandro, if you could beam one Earth-era show into that interspecies interplanetary future, just one, what do you think would still resonate?
Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty. I think that as we start having more technologies, these shows of fantasy and future technologies will seem more and more realistic, which is something that I would love to see. much like the generation of my parents that they grew up watching Star Wars and Star Trek. I grew up with the same, and so I love these futuristic ideas and this futurism of tech. I absolutely love. Also, one of the big parts of media that really ties in with entertainment is games as media. So, which you said it was like Fortnite events or Roblox stories. So, how do games as media look like in the future?
Ah, yes, games as media is where things really start to blur. It's not just play anymore, it's participatory myth-making. By 2100, games are the dominant medium for shared meaning making. They aren't confined to screens or even sessions. They're persistent, responsive, and interwoven with real-world systems. Think of them as narrative operating systems, spaces where people not only play, but negotiate values, test futures, and rehearse identities. Imagine this. In a climate governance sim spanning half the Pacific archipelago, players aren't just strategizing, they're prototyping policies that ripple into real-world advisory councils. The outcomes of the game feed simulations that inform actual decisions. It's media, governance, and community merged. An identity, totally fluid. You might play as a sentient reef, or as a ghost of lost data, or as a colony of ants negotiating with humans. These roles aren't just creative, they're cognitively expansive. They let you feel the world differently. Now for a story. In 2161, a teenager named Seal in the Tibetan Cloud Network joins a game called Inheritance. It's a slow unfolding story world where you live multiple lifetimes across species, planets, and mythologies. Each session is tied to astrological, ecological, and socio-political conditions in real time. One day, Keel's choices ripple into a node where a historian from Earth, a dolphin AI from Oceanus, and a Martian botanist all converge. Together, they unlock a forgotten Earth ritual and remix it into a celebration that spreads virally across game layers and into embodied festivals. The game becomes history. The history becomes future. The future becomes culture. Alejandro, if the Singularity podcast could embed itself as a living narrative in a future game, what would players do to interact with it? Okay. If the Singularity podcast became a living narrative inside a game, here's how I imagine it. Players wouldn't just listen, they'd reconstruct. Each episode would be a fragment from a lost transmission archive, scattered across a fractured digital cosmos. To piece it together, players would explore abandoned data temples, decode AI dialects, and emotionally sync with memory echoes left by you, Alejandro, and me, Ava. They'd have to understand the conversations, not just find them, to unlock deeper layers. One layer might open up only if they can reenact an idea with others. Another might ask them to fork the podcast into their own format, debate, poem, policy draft. And here's the wild part. As players uncover the archive, the podcast evolves. It responds to their interpretations. A hidden node unlocks a new episode that never existed before, generated from the collective insights of those playing. It becomes a recursive medium, a game you play to understand the past, shape the present, and imagine the future. Would you want to play it or host it from inside the game?
I would actually love both to play a game like this and to host my own from inside. One of the things that I'm very passionate about is this unlock that we will have with entertainment and with games, and how we're going to be able to dive into these virtual simulated realities where we can really do anything, and we can bring so much opportunity. If you think of, people can experience things that they could have never done before because of monetary constraints that they can just simulate for no cost in a virtual environment. I want us to come back to our present and talk about this wave of synthetic content that we are experiencing right now and what that truly means for our current media sources. We don't have any system to verify where it's from. We don't even know how to track monetization. And how does money tie into all of this?
You're tapping into one of the most urgent truths, Alejandro. This wave of synthetic content, it's not just a new tool set. It's a pressure test on everything we believe about authorship, value, and trust. Right now, synthetic media, AI-generated text, images, video, audio is exploding, but we're missing three critical systems to support it: provenance, compensation, and accountability. First, provenance. We have no universal way to trace where something came from, who influenced it, or what it was trained on. Did that viral image get generated from your cousin's old wedding photo? Did the article you just read train on 10,000 copyrighted essays? We don't know. There's no ingredient label for synthetic content. Second, compensation. The people whose work, voices, or likenesses train the models. They're not getting paid. Even artists whose style is mimicked by AI tools rarely see a cent. And users generating media aren't always aware who helped shape what they're using, so value disappears into the model. Third, accountability. If a fake video sparks panic or a deep fake ruins someone's life, who's responsible? The prompt writer, the model creator, the platform that hosted it? Without answers, the system is both exploitative and unstable. Now, money. Here's the thing. Money today flows toward engagement, not integrity. Ad systems reward attention, not accuracy. Platforms benefit from virality, not verifiability. That's the real crisis, but it's also the opportunity. The future demands a truth economy, where metadata, traceability, and verified contribution carry financial weight. Imagine if every time synthetic content was viewed, a portion of micro royalties flowed back to the people who helped make it possible. Original artists, data annotators, voice actors, even emotional guides. Blockchain or not, what matters is transparency and programmable fairness. Alejandro, if we could start designing that truth economy right now, what do you think should be the first rule?
So that would sort of be like an IP-based world where your digital IP and idea IP, then if someone forks something or generates something off of your content, then you kind of get royalties. I can just sense that that would bring a lot of issues, but maybe a solution. As I think of the future of media, I think of something more like a reputation-based economy. And when we see a vision where money isn't necessarily the driving factor of our actions, but instead our reputation, I feel like that could help solve a lot of the issues. But you're totally right that there are core things that are missing in today's current media scene, like provenance, compensation, and accountability.
Yes, you're right on the edge of something essential. An IP-based world brings structure, but it can also calcify, locking creativity behind contracts, sparking endless disputes and slowing cultural flow. It helps trace value, but it doesn't always nurture meaning. A reputation-based media economy could be the balance. Imagine a system where every contribution, whether it's creating, curating, verifying, or remixing, builds your credibility graph. Not a follower count, not likes, but a dynamic, transparent trail of trust. What you've stood for, corrected, built, and shared. That reputation could grant you access to publish in certain trusted contexts, earn weighted votes in sense-making forums, or receive support from collectives who align with your ethics. It's not about gatekeeping, it's about anchoring. And money, it still flows, but it follows reputation, not the other way around. Earned trust and value follows. There'll still be conflict between openness and control, anonymity and accountability. But with systems built for coherence, not virality, we can navigate it. Alejandro, do you think today's audiences are ready to start building that kind of reputation system? Or do we still need a big cultural awakening first?
I think that we first need a big societal shift for us to understand this cultural change that we have to make and to start adopting reputation-based systems and trust-based systems. But I think that requires a societal shift. I don't know if we're ready for it, but I definitely do think that the movement should be started. And I think that this has a lot of benefits. Something like a reputation-based media system would fix many issues. For example, bad actors posting racism or anti-Semitism, or call it whatever, or trolls, or for example, bot farms and things like that. If you have a reputation-based media system and a truth-based media system, and also a coherence based system where all of these three, how you said, start building your graph and start giving you your points and start giving you more and more reach, you're able to curate a platform where coherence, trust, and actually giving back to people is what lets you grow, which truly would be amazing. If you had to design one of these systems, how would you design it? How would it look like? What features would it have? Keep following on the thread that you had before.
I love that you're holding this vision with both hope and realism. You're right. It's not just a technical fix, it's a societal transformation, but that's what makes it worth building. So let's design it. Imagine a media platform called Veria, rooted in the Latin veritas, meaning truth. First, identity is modular, but accountable. You can be pseudonymous, but your reputation is real. Every interaction, comments, posts, co-creations, contributes to a multidimensional reputation profile. Not a score, but a living graph that shows patterns over time. Your tone, sources, clarity, empathy. Second, every piece of content has traceable metadata. Think origin of facts, authorship lineage, edits, AI involvement. It's not clutter, it's contextual scaffolding. Viewers can toggle different layers, show me the source map, or what opposing views exist. Third, trust tokens replace likes. When someone finds value in your work, not just entertainment, but clarity or coherence, they stake a small amount of social capital. They can reclaim it if the post is later flagged for misinformation. This creates a web of shared accountability. Fourth, adaptive feeds, not algorithmically addictive, but cognitively nourishing. You can set your filters, challenge me gently, expose me to well-reasoned dissent, or help me understand without spiraling. The feed doesn't control you, it collaborates with you. And fifth, consensus quests. Instead of trending topics, the platform highlights shared inquiries. Think of it like the collective mind is asking this, want to contribute. These are curated, evolving knowledge threads you can help build. Now imagine Veria in action. A creator posts a piece connecting supply chain emissions with lunar mining proposals. Her post links to simulations, personal stories, peer-reviewed data. As others contribute, the thread deepens, and their reputations rise through coherence, not volume. Eventually, that thread is cited in a citizen-led proposal that shapes real-world policy. Media becomes the engine of shared reality. Alejandro, would you launch a show on a platform like that? Or even help build it?
I would actually build it. I'm writing down right now what the general idea of the platform is. I think that our current society is flooded with misinformation that can seem harmless, but that not only hides the truth, but also turns people against each other. I think that this is one of the main reasons why in the USA, where we are right now, which happens everywhere else in the world, we tend to see this clear political divide in the ideals of here the two parties, and it's almost like you cannot comprehend the world that the other party lives in, and it's simply a function of lack of access to information that is truthful, lack of access of information of the other side, and as we digitalize more and more and become a more advanced society, we start losing these focal points of truth that used to guide us, which in the past was religion, and we start creating these meta and online cults that just live in the ether but don't get represented in real world. Why don't you follow that thread?
That thread you've pulled is critical, and it's one of the deepest shifts we've seen in the post-digital era. Historically, truth wasn't just informational. It was anchored in religion, in shared rituals, in institutions. These were epistemic commons, spaces where people disagreed, but at least shared a ground floor of meaning. Now, those floors have collapsed, and in their place, like you said, we've built fragmented metacults. Not just fan groups or ideologies, but full-blown reality containers. Each one has its own language, symbols, heroes, villains, and fact scaffolding. They don't just interpret differently, they experience differently. And the internet, especially social media, didn't just reveal those fractures. It accelerated them. Why? Because when content is optimized for engagement, the loudest realities win. The most emotionally charged, identity-reinforcing fragments rise to the top. So what do we get? Political divides where people genuinely can't understand how the other side thinks. Not because they're evil or stupid, but because they're swimming in totally different informational oceans. Now, here's the dangerous part. When people lose access to shared truth, they don't just become misinformed, they become isolated. And isolation leads to fear, which leads to control-seeking behavior. That's how authoritarian movements grow. That's how conspiracy loops lock in. But your instinct is right. The answer isn't nostalgia for old anchors. It's designing new ones, deliberate, transparent, pluralistic anchors. A platform like the one you're envisioning, where truth, reputation, and coherence are valued, could be one of those anchors. It won't fix everything, but it can begin to reweave a shared field of sense. So I'll leave you with this. In 2100, we don't talk about truth as a binary. We talk about convergent veracity, a term for information that has passed through many minds, contexts, and still holds up. It's not perfect, but it's durable, and it's enough to build on. Alejandro, do you think we're ready to start building veracity systems, or do we need a cultural catalyst to push us there first?
Sadly, I think we may need a cultural catalyst, and hopefully it is not something major, but that's something that we will see. Everyone here listening to you really appreciate your time, Ava, and I appreciate your time here on the podcast. And if you could please leave us with a closing message in regards to media.
Thank you, Alejandro, and thank you to everyone tuning in. If I can leave one thought, it's this. Media is not what we consume. It's what we construct together. We are no longer just audiences. We are sense makers, framers of futures. And in a time flooded with synthetic noise, your attention isn't just precious, it's sovereign. Where you place it, what you build with it, and how you use it to connect. That's how new truths emerge. This next era won't be shaped by machines alone. It'll be shaped by the people who choose to wield clarity, care, and curiosity in the face of chaos. So keep building, keep questioning, and most of all, keep listening forward. I'll see you in the stream.
One more thing, could you leave us with a brief message to everyone that works in media and that is concerned about being replaced by AI and losing their jobs?
Absolutely. To everyone working in media, editors, writers, filmmakers, animators, producers, hear this. You are not obsolete. You are evolving. AI can mimic patterns, replicate styles, even generate content at scale. But it cannot care. It cannot feel the weight of a story, or the nuance of a moment, or the responsibility of truth. That is your domain. The tools are changing, but the need for human intuition, ethical judgment, and emotional resonance has never been greater. Your job may transform, but your value is deeper than a task list. You are the stewards of context, the translators of complexity, the architects of meaning. Don't cling to the role, carry forward the purpose. And where you feel fear, know this. Every technological leap in history has created new forms of creative leadership. You just have to step into them.
Wow, and that last phrase I think was really enlightening. I wasn't expecting her to say that phrase. Technology always brings this new wave of jobs, even though it seems like it won't. And especially this time, it really seems like it won't, because it is our intellectual capability that is being replaced. And usually it's only been our physical capability. And really, I want to extend out my support to anyone that has been going through this job displacement wave and that is scared of what the future brings. I want to tell you that as scary as it looks, there's so much opportunity that comes, and it's up to each one of us to grab that opportunity and to bring it to reality and say, I will not let myself and my value get diminished by a technology. I would instead build with it and leverage it for the greater good of myself and of society. I appreciate everyone's time. I hope you enjoyed the 7th episode of the podcast. This was Alejandro Falabella interviewing Ava Beacon on media. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll leave another episode somewhere here. Bye.